Hello, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I am good, thank you. I'm good. And I'm very excited because we've got a guest again.
Yes, another guest podcast. Oh, we are loving these at the moment, guys. So we are really excited because we have Teri Macgilbert from at Sassy Sober Mum on the show with us today. Teri helps people get and stay successfully sober. She is an emotional sobriety coach, host of Sober Stories podcast, and founder of Thrive Sober Community. Now, as you guys may know, Charlotte and I are sober, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
I'm quite new to this journey personally, but when we first decided to do this, I remember you saying to me, Charlotte, let's just follow as many sober accounts as we can on Instagram so that we're not alone.
Literally.
And Teri's account is one, so Sassy Sober Mum is one of the first that we started to follow. And when we knew we wanted to have a conversation around sobriety, you were just the person we knew we wanted on the show. And when you said yes, the kitchen dance celebration that I had was
We were
everything.
both literally like, Terry said yes.
So, without further ado, welcome to the show, Teri.
Wow, what an intro. Honestly, that's amazing. It's lovely to be here and thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh,
You're
no,
welcome.
it's honestly amazing to have you here. You've kept us on track more than you probably know. So a big, big thank you. So yeah, we'll kick straight off, shall we? And what we just thought we'd kind of start with is just to hear a little bit about your story and how you kind of embarked on your sober journey and what that kind of looked like for you. So we'll pass straight over to you if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. So my story, I always think that my story is quite normal, but I suppose it's kind of normal in the drinking world. So I was a teenage drinker. I did the whole being 14, going to the park with friends, drinking some very awful drinks.
Yeah.
And the intention was always just get drunk, get absolutely wrecked. That was the outcome. And I was very good at it. But also, so were all my friends. So that culture of going out and drinking to get drunk was sort of always the way for me. And what I didn't do is, when I grew up a little bit and got into my 20s and started going to work, I never developed that, what I would see as grown-up drinking style, which is to have a few glasses of wine with dinner and be very demure. And I felt like I was the opposite of that. So I was like the party girl. I didn't have an off switch. If there was a social engagement happening, I wanted to be there, and I would be there early, and I would have probably had drinks before at home getting ready, all that stuff that I think, looking back, wasn't really problematic in my 20s. Although I suppose there were incidents, when I look back very honestly, there were incidents where I think my drinking did get me into some silly situations or some dangerous situations. But, working with people, again, that's not uncommon to have that, every so often. So in my 30s, my career, I kind of got into my career, and that kind of work hard, play hard mentality really hit me. And, going out for drinks after work, or having my own space, having my own flat, or living with a partner, having wine in the evening. I just, it was a sort of almost an everyday part of my life. And towards the end of my 30s, I started to feel like really what I started to kind of try to manage my drinking better and to moderate. And, I now realize, if you have to put the focus and attention on moderation, or if you have to try and moderate, there's the clue.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to achieve that, or you're going to significantly struggle with that. And I had a couple of bouts of going sober. I had a couple of situations that happened where I, let myself down. I felt the shame, and I felt the pressure to stop drinking, either external pressure, maybe from relationships, or just realizing that I might be in a slightly darker place than I wanted to be in terms of my drinking, particularly through difficult times. So I had a kind of big breakup in my late 30s, and I sort of knew that if I was going to drink through that breakup, then that would be bad news. So I kind of had that foresight. So I gave myself a 100-day challenge. But, like both times that I had managed to stop drinking before, when I went back to drinking, I went back bigger and harder and maybe faster. It was all kind of a little bit more kind of enhanced, if you like, or magnified. So I basically got into a new relationship. I was very happy, and this person didn't drink really a lot, and he had managed to grow out of that type of drinking, whereas sort of I hadn't, and like I said, the people around me hadn't either. So I didn't really have any reference point. I don't think that my drinking might be, on the more heavy side. But when we were together on evenings, I would still have my glasses of wine, and he would have a pint of water or a pint of squash. And it kind of made my drinking feel big. He didn't say anything, but I did just start to notice, why do I need to have a drink in this situation? Like, what am I really getting from it? And I convinced myself, it's okay though, Teri, because you can moderate, you've cracked this now, don't worry about it. And then I went out with girlfriends on a weekend, and it got very messy very quickly. And I had a blackout, which wasn't uncommon for me, to be honest. I'd sort of learned how to, that was quite normal for me to go out and black out. But I'd had a blackout, and I don't remember anything really happening that night, but I was up until the early hours. And when I woke up the next day, something hit me. It was shame and frustration and anger, but it was 10 times bigger than it had been ever before. Don't get me wrong, it was quite bad before sometimes, but I just felt like, I just had this kind of this sort of like moment where I thought, if I don't do something to address this or stop this, I could lose everything. I always describe it like I felt like I was living on a knife edge. That, yeah, my moderating is going fine, it's all very well, but I sort of knew deep down that the next time I might just do something really stupid. What if the next time I get in my car and crash it or something, or I didn't want to do those things. But what it's like sometimes when you drink, and if you're in a blackout, you're not really on top of what you're doing. It's quite frightening, it's quite scary. And I was afraid that I might lose this relationship, that something might happen with my children, that one day something that could just change my life would happen, and then I would regret it. Yeah. Or the other thing was that one day in maybe 10 or 15 years' time, I might be sitting in a doctor's office with a diagnosis of having something like breast cancer, which I know is very heavily linked to lifestyle, to sort of drinking and smoking, of which I did both when I drank. And it's not that you can necessarily avoid those things by stopping drinking, although I do think you significantly improve your chances of not getting it. But I didn't want to sit there and have regrets, and just know that actually, I could have done something about it in my early 40s. And it's just time to wake up and to stop putting it off. And also just not living in that mentality of, wow, it won't happen to me, because it could, because it happened to my mum, and she died in her mid-50s from breast cancer, and she was a very heavy drinker, maybe alcoholic, don't know, wasn't diagnosed. So that's my kind of, in a nutshell, that's my story with alcohol. It was initially fun, but always quite intensely focused on getting wrecked. And that pattern continued. And as I got older, probably my drinking increased in terms of I did it more nights in my 30s than I did in my 20s, let's say. And I just think that relationship of, or the ratio, should I say, of what you're getting in and what you're getting out, you know, I felt like towards the end that it was too heavily weighted on the cost for me. What I was getting out of it as a perceived benefit was not worth the cost that I was experiencing in terms of anxiety and, you know, worrying about what might happen next and my health and all that stuff.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Like, literally, I think there's so many parts of that I just, kind of want to just pick apart a little bit. Like, it's so ingrained in our culture in that way, isn't it? And I think this is what I said just before we logged on, like how I started was I listened to a podcast that just hit me right where I needed to be hit, that it was like this age between 30 and 60, like our generation, it's so ingrained. And like that kind of point of going out to, like you say, just get wrecked, that's the point of it. And then I think I kind of had this moment where I woke up and was like, this isn't serving me anymore. And it's just so ingrained in our culture. And I can't believe that I never saw that before.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting as well is you don't see it. You don't see it when you're in it, and you don't even necessarily think about it too much. But when you stop and you try to focus your attention on breaking down the beliefs that you have around alcohol and what you think you're getting from it, because a lot of it's all beliefs at the end of the day, you know, it's all just, like you say, the culture and the social conditioning and the way you were raised and the friendships that you've formed and the things you've watched on TV. And I mean, it's just, you know, it is literally everywhere. When you spend that time not drinking and reflecting on where, you know, how you used to drink, I think it's almost like you just see it completely in a completely different light. And it's what, like when you see it, you can't unsee it, you know, and it changes. So even people that are in that sober curious phase where they're sort of maybe a bit interested in, you know, what's all this about living alcohol free, not quite there yet, or maybe they've tried a few stints or they've read a few books, the stuff that you learn, it doesn't ever go away. So I think that your perspective starts to shift, and it just keeps shifting the further in that you get, which is what's really lovely about it. But it is difficult because there is that whole element of it, just you're surrounded by it. And when you stop drinking, it's still frustrating that you would stop drinking, and then people, particularly drinkers that you used to drink with, or friends that are maybe drinkers, they don't get it and they don't understand why you would want to do that, and they just think that you've gone on to this, you know, you're off now on your island of no fun over there. and actually, you know, one of the things I constantly try to reframe for people is, you know, don't feel bad that you're not finding standing in a bar for 5 hours fun anymore, because that's not fun. You know, it's not that you're not fun anymore or that you're boring. Actually, that activity is boring. You know, when I think about how I want to enjoy my weekend, it never involves that kind of activity. It involves other things that I like, that I just, wholesome things or just different things. And so I think that there is still a culture that you can only have fun if you drink, and I am glad to see that is kind of breaking down, but it is a slow dismantling.
My biggest thing was that I'm boring. That was the biggest one in me, that I just couldn't. Took me a while to get past, and it would creep, and it's still I'm quite not plain sailing right now, but every few months I get that hit where I'm like, oh, am I just being boring though? And I'm like, whoa, no, you're not. Like, and it is in there. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. I'm glad you phrased that, Teri, because a question I had for myself was, how do I have fun without alcohol? Because that association was so strong. Because like yourself, from the age of 14 down the park with the gigantic biggest bottle of White Lightning cider that I could find. You know, that is how we have fun. And it's so ingrained in us from such a young age. I'm like, well, who am I without it? Is it not about just drinking every weekend, and how that for me personally ramped up to pretty much every weeknight, and to the feeling of like, when you get into the end of the bottle of wine, I'm just like, oh, I'm getting a bit twitchy because I'm not sure if there's any more in the house. Like all that around, that's me, and that's how I have fun. And it's like, it's just it's being open to new ways, isn't it? And seeing new perspectives. And I love how you positioned it, that maybe it's not me that's not the boring one, you know, maybe actually standing in the bar isn't the fun thing. And I know Charlotte and I have both been on this sort of discovery to explore what else we do that brings us fun. So it could be that we go for a walk to see the sunset of an evening. It could be that we go wild water swimming in a lake. It could be that, I don't know what else we do, still go to gigs and dance. There's there's a million and one things that we can still do to have fun. And another thing you said was how we see things differently. And we say this, don't we, Charlotte? It's like life in high definition. I don't know if you'd agree, but everything's just so like, I have so much fun, and I'm still doing similar things with my friends. They're still having the drinks, and I'm coming away and I'm like, following morning, I feel great, bit smug. I remember the conversations. I still was up till late having a wild time. You know, I still had just a great experience, if not a better one, because I was really present, and I've still got the following day to do the wonderful things that I want to do. Whereas historically, it would be wiped out. I'd feel groggy. I'd feel frustrated and angry at myself. I'd be irritable and short with the kids. I wouldn't be interested in doing anything with them. I'd be looking for crappy food to, you know, what greasy food can I get my hands on? And it's just like well, I think initially when I thought about giving up alcohol, it's like I'm, you know, like a lack space of giving things up. But you mentioned earlier about people's beliefs of like, what are they, you know, what does alcohol give me? And I think what I've come to realize, actually, I'm giving it up, I'm not losing anything, I'm just gaining so much more.
That's it. It takes practice, you know. You have to teach yourself how to shift your mindset. It doesn't happen overnight. And you know, I think by looking at what you're gaining, and by trying, and that's why I always say to people, if you can, journaling is brilliant. And it's brilliant in the beginning, because journaling forces you to write out what you're thinking, you know, and so that you can see your thoughts on paper. And that's the key to everything, really, is the thoughts. You know, it's having those thoughts around, I'm so boring without alcohol, and it's challenging those thoughts and saying, well, is that a fact? You know, where is the evidence that I'm boring if I don't drink? And what evidence have I got, or can I think about in my past, or maybe even, you know, last weekend? What evidence have I got to support that actually I can have a good time, and I can be, you know, into the flow of the night and dancing, all of these things? And I think it's just about training yourself, or teaching yourself how to look at things from a different perspective, and focusing more, like you say, on the gains and not what you're losing. And that just takes practice, but you know, that is something that, you know, I also incorporated, you know, the gratitude element of things. And so waking up and just feeling so grateful that I'm not running at 70% today, you know, like I had been when I was drinking, and having to plan in a nap at lunchtime. Can I get a quick half an hour? Which is, you know, I shouldn't be needing to do that in my 40s. You know, it's not, but that's what the alcohol was doing. So I think that takes some work, unpicking those beliefs, focusing on what you're gaining, and also I think there's also a lot to do with the acceptance, you know, accepting that it will be challenging, accepting that it will be different. But does different mean bad? No, it doesn't. It means different. And it is about finding new ways. I don't know why I was thinking about this, but, you know, I was thinking, you know, for example, when you do have children or something like that, when you have those children, you don't know what life looks like with a child, and you don't know how to entertain a child or what's fun for a child. So you have to think about what you're going to do. You have to sort of explore things, or find classes, or brainstorm, or you copy what other people are doing, and and then you just find your way. And now, if I said, oh, what would you do for your kids that's fun, you could probably think of 10 things that you would do over the weekend. So it's applying that same practice to yourself. It's like, what I always say as well for people, that if you can connect with the things that you enjoyed as a child, there's so much kind of what's the word? It's kind of becomes quite self-soothing. So, for example, if you liked writing as a child, well, then maybe you'd love journaling, or maybe you could write some poems. If you liked painting or drawing, well, when's the last time that you picked up a pencil or a paintbrush? And I think sometimes we think that because we morph into this adult version of ourselves, we're not allowed to do the things that we used to love doing as a kid anymore, because that's for when we were kids. But I would say, why? Like, now is the perfect time to pick up those things that you did as a kid that you loved. So yeah, I think it's about finding new things to do, being creative with it, and even brainstorming, like just writing a list of things that maybe you've been putting off, or things that push you out of your comfort zone. Because I think that's win-win then, because doing new things and trying new experiences, and then finding that, hey, you actually quite enjoy it, well, then that just gives you that feel-good factor. And all of those times, they just sort of cement that feeling that you're on the right path and you're on the right track.
You really do, don't they? And I think you've just kind of said something there that I know when I stopped, I could have very easily continued to do the same things and not kind of go on that discovery journey. And I remember being like, so that I do this and I'm happy and fulfilled doing this, I've got to push that comfort zone, because otherwise I think I would just resent it. So my husband still drinks, and I found that quite hard at points, like, because I didn't really have Kat was I'd just speak to Kat about it, because it was kind of you were my outlet, weren't you? But we could have still done the same things, where it was me standing up. And I love the quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world," because I think that is just, for me, that's been everything on this journey, as well as my self-development journey. But those changes that I want to make, I had to book in to do those things to really make myself do it. Otherwise, I think I would have stopped the drinking, but then just not felt good about it, because you have to almost replace it with something else, like, something that joy. But I think I found that being quite a push in the beginning times. And it was that kind of different how me and my husband would spend time together, that wasn't going down to the pub. So we actually ended up doing like Snowdon, and we went and climbed that, and it was such an incredible weekend. But it's doing more of those things, isn't it? So it's this whole like lifestyle shift, and like you're saying, going back and not putting stuff off anymore. And I think that's been the magic in this journey, is I'm not putting anything off, and I'm living more than I was drinking, because I'm going, if I'm not drinking, I'm going to go and do that thing. And now that's the natural way of living for me. I'm like, if I want to do something, I'm going to book it in and I'm going to go do it. But that's been a journey in itself.
Yeah, because you put so much off, right, when you drink, don't you? Or you agree to things and then you just back out of them. You're just so flaky, I think, when you're a drinker. So when you stop drinking, you have this kind of quite immediate clarity, and often energy. Even if you're feeling quite tired, it's a different sort of tired in the very beginning, but there is more time. There's so much more time. That's the one thing that I really noticed in the beginning. I was drinking maybe 5 nights a week, and to gain that time back was, for me, I was thinking, what am I going to do with all this time? And I filled a lot of it with learning about drinking and sobriety, and how alcohol affects the brain, and just kind of hyper focusing. That's very me, to hyper focus, to be honest. If I get into something, that's it, I'm fully in. And so I used a lot of that time in the beginning to do those things. But I think also that there is that heavy association with doing your regular things. You know, when you put the drink down, it's dangerous really just to try and carry on doing everything as you did it. Even for me, one of my biggest triggers, if you like, was cooking dinner. I love to cook dinner with wine. It was, I honestly felt like, how do I get past that, you know, not drinking with wine? So for me, in the beginning, I would have an alcohol-free beer, because that would sort of signal my ritual, you know, drink in the evening. And I put headphones on and listened to podcasts whilst I cooked, because it just helped to distract me from that activity that I thought I was missing. And, you know, it's, there's, I don't know if you've heard about this, but there is that phrase of a dry drunk, who is somebody who stops drinking, but they're relying on willpower and they're kind of white knuckling it. And what they're doing is they're just continuing to live the way they always live, but just without alcohol. And so they don't change their mindset or perspective. They don't embrace the self-discovery and the self-development journey. And so actually they can feel pretty annoyed, you know, several weeks or months in, they're thinking, this is rubbish, I'm not enjoying anything, I can't go out, you know, I'm boring. And I think that often leads people back to drinking again, because they don't see any pleasure and joy. And so in the beginning, that association, you know, our brains even drop some dopamine as soon as we think about alcohol. You know, that's all happening without us even knowing. So sometimes we can be just walking past a shop that we used to buy a lot of wine, and even though we're very strong in our resolve, we don't want to drink, just looking at the shop will trigger a dopamine hit, because our brain is trying to remind us, you really want that alcohol, Teri, go in that shop and buy that wine. Until we kind of detangle those connections in our brain, they stay strong. And that's what the first year or year and a half or 2 years of being sober is about. It's about replacing those associations or distracting from those associations and recreating new neural pathways of things that we're doing that, you know, hopefully is also bringing us some pleasure and joy.
Yeah,
I love that you've connected that, because that's the difference, isn't it? Compared to like a dry January, where historically I would just not go out, not do anything, feel a bit just depressed and like, oh, I'm just a bit mad about this, but I know I've got to do it. Then it'd get to February, I'd make up for it, I'd drink more, and I'd go back into where I was. And that's what this is so much more than going sober, isn't it? It's the discovery, and it's the mindset, and it's everything. So I love that.
Yeah, and I think just to finish that point, you know, sometimes people will come to me for coaching and they'll say, I've done dry Januaries or sober October and I just can't do it. And, you know, or I've proved to myself that I just can't do it. And I'd say, but hang on, the frame of mind that you're going into a 30-day period without drinking is completely different when you know that you're going back to it. Than it is when you embark on this journey and you're saying, hey, look, you know, this might be scary, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I am really determined to get this thing out of my way, and I'm going to give it everything. You know, there is so much of a difference there. So I think, you're absolutely right. I do think that 30 days off here and there can be good for some people, because sometimes people do carry on, you know. But if you're a drinker like I was, I did the 30 days. I couldn't even get through the 30 days actually. So I've definitely failed quite a few dry Januaries, because I'm trying to tick a box to convince myself that I don't have an issue. And that's all I'm doing it for. And because everyone else is doing it and I'm a bit skin anyway, I'm just not going to drink for the month. But by the 16th, I'm literally, you know, kind of, right, that's it. I've done it now. Let's go back. So completely different.
I've got a question, Teri, regarding your journey. So was it 2019 that you stopped drinking? So over that period of time, how long into that journey was it where you kind of like, when were the most challenging times? And what were those major challenges, and how did you navigate them? And then was it like after, like, I don't know, a year, 18 months, 2 years, that then that just they disappear? If that,
Yeah.
I hope that question makes sense. Do you know what I mean? Like, or is it is there a constant like thing, or is it kind of in the early days there's challenges, but it gets easier over time?
It's a great question, and it's quite a difficult one to answer, actually. But I would treat it's a bit like a spectrum, or it was for me. It's like a spectrum. So I went into stopping drinking. I was so 100% ready to stop drinking. For me, it was never, oh, can I do this? I knew that I could do it. I knew that I could do it. I didn't know how to do it, and I knew that it would be bumpy, and I didn't underestimate, I wasn't going into it thinking this is going to be a walk in the park. Like I expected it to be challenging at times, but fundamentally my mindset was very, very strong from the outset. And I think that carries you a very, very good way into the journey, to be honest. Even on more tricky days, let's say, just knowing that it wouldn't break me. It would just be difficult, but it wouldn't break me, is obviously a really great place to be. But I think in the first 6 months, the challenges were telling other people. I found that was an area that I found there was a lot of discomfort. Lots of people were challenging me, and the people pleaser in me was out in full swing, and I would try to justify what I was doing, over explain myself, and the more that I did that, the more people, it was ammunition for people. It gave people ammunition to just hit me with more questions. And afterwards, after those situations, I really beat myself up. I just think, Teri, why do you need to tell all these people, just be short, be direct? And so I learned that lesson, the hard way. But it turned into a positive, because I did handle myself better, more quickly in those situations. But I found that quite uncomfortable at first. And also, I know now that when you're dealing with other people and you stop drinking, it shines a light. For some reason, it shines a light on their alcohol use. I don't mean to do that, but people get defensive and people feel uncomfortable. And I know that when I used to drink, I used to hate sober people. Be like, get them away from me. I don't want, I'm not interested in talking to that person. Because I think, on some kind of weird, deep level, it made me uncomfortable, because I knew I probably should be doing the same sort of thing. So yeah, I think that dealing with people was difficult. And then I'm trying to think I had lots of periods where it was very good. Then the next thing that happened, and I would say this kind of hit me more 6 months in, was managing the feelings that came up. And there's this quote, I always use it, makes me chuckle a bit. That the good news, when you stop drinking, the good news is you start to feel your feelings. The bad news is you start to feel your feelings. It's like, that is so true. Because I didn't realize that I'd probably used alcohol to manage difficult feelings for probably all my adult life, and since I was a teenager. And so part of that was that I realized that I hadn't built any decent coping skills, outside of just drinking myself into oblivion for a night. I didn't know how to handle situations. I wasn't very good with conflict. I just didn't know how to manage my own state of mind. So I felt like I was very up and down when things got difficult. Sometimes I would burst into tears and I didn't even know why. And there was lots of that stuff to kind of untangle, I think. And there was probably a period of, I don't know, I would say actually, up until quite recently, but learning to recognize that and learning to accept it, which is something that I wasn't very, very good at. So basically, to try and make some sense of what I'm saying, I would, be in a challenging situation, I'd react badly in that situation, then I would really hate myself. So, that cycle is quite devastating. And then I would kind of cry and feel depressed, and then I would just sort of kind of move on. And I just found that I found that a bit frustrating, and I think I had to learn how to deal with that. And that didn't happen overnight. That was a lot of trial and error. That was a lot of being honest with myself. That was a lot of reflecting on situations where I hadn't acted the way that I wanted to act, and just sort of keep having conversations with myself. But I think a large part of it is also, and this is the bit that I found more recently, and this is the bit that I always try to cascade to people that are in this journey or early into this journey, is that, allow yourself to have the feelings. It's okay to feel a certain way, and just try and accept that you're going to have different feelings, and try not to judge yourself for it. And I just remember I would get really caught up in knots, judging myself for, So yeah, I think the whole bucket of, having feelings, realizing that you have difficult feelings, or that maybe you feel out of control of your emotions in difficult situations, especially conflict in maybe in relationships or at work, and then trying to piece together these strategies, of which a big part of that is actually just don't judge yourself for it, let yourself have those feelings, and then just try and work with it and try and just keep practicing. So I don't know, that I think that can be a big thing for people. I also had some trauma in my past as well, and I've had to sort of, the lid has come off of that, and I've had to look at that. And that's been a long process, but I feel like I've moved through that now, which has been really healing for me. And I think the last thing on this actually was when I was about 18 months into sobriety, I felt like I was nailing it, and I was nailing it, but I had a big craving. I walked past somebody who had a rosé on their table in a pub in a garden outside in the summer. And I looked at it and I thought, oh God, that looks really nice. I'd really like that. And again, I really judged myself for that. And I really beat myself up for having that, because I felt like I should not be doing that at my stage. But therein is the lesson, I always think when there are difficult situations, there is always so much growth. And so when I had time to reflect on that, what that taught me was that you can't judge it, take the expectations away. There is no right amount of time. Yeah, I could still get craving out. I don't think I would, to be honest. I'm 4 years in now, and I've not felt like that since that 18 months period. It was actually the last time. It's almost like part of my brain was going, just one last little, just going to try one more time so I can hook you back in. And it didn't. But I think going through that process of judging myself and feeling annoyed that, I should, in inverted commas, should not be feeling that way, it taught me that you just have to really be cool with what's going on this journey, and don't apply expectations. Do not look at someone else and think, well, they're there, why am I not there? Because everyone is different and everyone has a different experience.
Love that.
That is such sound advice, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And we do, don't we? So we've put a ban on the word should in our membership, because we're just shoulding all over ourselves all the time. Like, let's just stay in our own lane, like you say. And it is a journey, and we all do it at different points. And yeah, it is about not judging ourselves for where we're at. And I think this was what really released it for me, was like kind of not seeing it as an adventure at the beginning, and not, I'm now sober and that's it. And I think I needed that at the beginning for that reason, that just kind of let me explore and not kind of compare, I suppose, because I was then on my own journey and seeing where it took me.
Yes.
Yeah. And with regards to the feelings as well there, Teri, that you touch on, because there's not like the masking or the escapism or the kind of hiding things with the alcohol. There's huge clarity, and with that comes those feelings. And it's just a great opportunity to really get to know ourselves better in much deeper ways than we possibly ever have. And obviously you touched on some healing there with some trauma. And I wonder if, you know, if we, with the alcohol, we just continue to hide from that, or, you know, run away from that. So it can feel quite scary, I'd imagine, to kind of, you know, embark on this adventure knowing that that's going to come up. But on the other side of it, and I know Charlotte, you'll agree with me here, it's just everything, isn't it? And that just leads me into one more question in terms of, what has this given you? Because obviously you've touched on how incredible sobriety has been. So what would you say is, you know, in being on this journey and being sober, how has it really changed your life, and what has it given you?
Oh, I get too excited when I get to answer questions like this. And I'm really smiling. I can feel that like inside me, you know, just sort of that excitement to answer it. I think the biggest thing is that it has repaired the relationship with myself. And for that, I just feel, makes me feel emotional. I feel eternally grateful for it. I have my own back now. Like, I 100% always back myself. And I didn't do that. I've never done that in my life. I've like a lot of people that, you know, I come across, or that maybe you come across, or that maybe are listening to this podcast, you know, there was a sort of deep feeling of not being good enough when I was, you know, younger, or, you know, growing up, and you know, and then I had imposter syndrome in my job. You know, there's always that feeling of, oh, you're just not good enough, Teri, or you just need to try harder, and, you know, and all those things. And I think when you're in that energy, you operate in a way that is not true and authentic, and you can't find real joy, I don't think. Everything is fleeting, because fundamentally that relationship with yourself is not there, or it's broken, or maybe it was never there. You know, I don't know for myself, but number one, it has allowed me to really get to know myself, really, really love who that person is, and, you know, really understand myself. And through that journey, I know what's right for me and what's not right for me. And I'm not afraid to say, no, and I actually don't want to do that thing. You know, whatever the situation is, but, you know, I found my voice, I've got the confidence to use it. And I know that I can go into a situation and I can validate myself. I don't need anyone to validate me anymore. I don't need a relationship to validate me, or my children to validate me, or my boss to validate me. I 100% validate myself. And I think when you're in that place, nothing can go wrong, really. And so that's kind of number one. The other things that it's given me is it's allowed me to grow in areas that I wanted to get better at, like patience with my kids, especially, and patience with myself. Like I said, I've got a big thing at the moment where I'm, you know, I'm very always paying attention to how I'm talking to myself, and correcting that voice that's trying to slip back into unhelpful patterns, you know, or yeah. So I think it's given me clarity, it's given me peace, it's given me, you know, confidence. In the morning when I wake up, I know who I am, what I'm doing, and there's only one version of me now. You know, there's not, you know, drunk Teri who's going to be on your kitchen table in 2 hours time, and there's not overbearing Teri that's going to talk over you. There's not Teri who's going to cry in the corner because her boss is horrible. You know, there's not that. There's just one person, and yeah, and I'm very proud of that person. And obviously, it's given me an opportunity to work in this space and help others, and that has been the most rewarding thing I've ever done, I think, in my life. Being able to wake up in the morning and know that someone's, you know, listened to the podcast, has messaged me, has said that it's changed their life, or, you know, whatever it is. I just think that this is my purpose. And so the thing that I was really afraid of, that I thought would rob me of everything, which is stopping drinking, has literally given birth to this new amazing life where I get to be in service, help other people, and heal from that myself as well. So it's, yeah.
Wow. Wowzers. That is incredible. And what an inspiration, honestly. That is that's everything. Like, who doesn't want that? That's complete awakening, isn't it? It's, I know who I am, I love who I am, and I'm good. I'm good. And I've got my own back. And to initially think that giving up something that we put so much on is gonna, just not be good for us, is possibly one of the best things, if not the best thing, that we could do for ourselves. And that is just, absolute inspiration. Thank you.
It really is. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us. And I suppose one last little thing, just for anyone who is listening, who is thinking maybe right at the beginning of this journey, or have been thinking about it, or wherever they're at, just kind of, what's the one piece of advice you would give them, if you could give them one? Might not be one, or just something, a little takeaway.
Can I give 2 bits?
Yes, of course.
They're very short, I promise. So I think I'll start with the kind of more hard-hitting piece first, which is, if you're worrying about the cost of giving up alcohol and stopping drinking, then think about what the bill of regret would look like. That's the first thing. And that's the thing, I think that, I think at some point, if you feel like you want to do it, you've just got to put your big girl pants on and do it, because otherwise you could be facing 10, 20 years down the line, you're just going to have so many regrets for not doing it. And I think that the cost of giving up is definitely lower than the price of regret. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that you can do anything. And I really mean that. So if you can cultivate that belief that, okay, it might be challenging at times, maybe you don't know what you're doing and it feels all a bit scary, but if you can just cultivate the belief that you can do it, and that you can give it your absolute best shot and reach the points that we talk about on this podcast, that's available to everybody. We're not a special 3 people in life. This is available to everybody. If you can just cultivate that belief, you will 100% get there. And that is basically what underpins it all, is the belief. So just believe that you can do it.
Love that so much. Thank you so much for sharing those. And obviously Teri has some incredible, you've got the podcast, which I've been tuning into, and I think one of my other kind of challenges I faced was that kind of feeling, even though I've got Kat and we're on this journey together, but feeling alone and feeling like I'm sometimes the only person, because my eyes just see like everybody else drinking and they're not. And I can be quite irrational like that sometimes. So your podcast is incredible. I absolutely love listening. You obviously interview everyday people, don't you? And it's just so amazing to hear so many different stories. So you have the podcast, and then you also have your community as well, don't you, Thrive, which I think is just amazing, as well as your coaching, because we need that, don't we? We need to know that it's not just us and we're on this journey together. And I think, sobriety is just, it's coming up, isn't it?
It is. I definitely think it's getting cooler.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yes.
Fingers crossed. It's on trend.
We are the early adopters. In 20 years' time, maybe it just won't be a thing to be drinking. It just won't be cool.
Yeah. What was it? You shared something with me, Kat, that what was it? Was it real or something, where he was predicting that alcohol will go like cigarettes have, with the packaging that's a little bit more like...
Well, it's already happening in Ireland. So in 2026, Ireland have committed to putting messages and graphic images of that it's linked to several types of cancers. So they're doing that from 2026. And I think Ireland were also the first people to do it with cigarettes as well. So
Gosh,
yeah,
okay.
so that's actually quite a big step.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
must be where it came from then. I
Yeah.
remember it was something along the lines of that.
And I think it was
wasn't
because Teri shared it on her socials.
Oh.
See the influence you have, Teri, unknowingly. Yes, amazing. There is a shift coming. There's a shift happening, isn't there,
There is.
ladies? A change is coming, and the change is good, and certainly is in this direction. So, Teri, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for joining us on the podcast today. Ways in which you can work with Teri will be in all of our show notes, guys. So if you don't already follow Sassy Sober Mum, get over there and give Teri a follow. And all details on her coaching and her Thrive Sober community will be there for you as well to access. So it's so great to connect with you today, Teri. And just thank you so much.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Oh,
Amazing.
thank you so much.
Speak soon.
Speak
Take care.
soon. Bye.
Bye.